Ever since the man got off the plane, he has been spraying water crazily, his entire body like a high-pressure hose. What's even stranger is the plane he flew on, originally a 3-hour flight. The plane ended up flying in the air for a whole 5 years. Yet, what's even more bizarre is that none of the passengers noticed anything unusual. They all believed it was just a regular 3-hour flight. However, the families of the passengers thought they had met with a disaster, but when the captain contacted the control tower to request landing, they didn't expect the ground staff to be scared stiff upon hearing it was Flight 828. After thousands of confirmations with the captain, the ground finally approved the plane's landing. However, it landed at a remote backup airport. When the passengers got off the plane, they were not greeted by their families but by a large number of police and reporters. Seeing this scene, the passengers were also panicked and started discussing what had happened. At this moment, Detective Robert stepped forward and said,
Plane departed Montego Bay, Jamaica on April 7, 2013. Today is November 4th, 2018. We've all been missing, presumed dead for 5.5 years.
This scared everyone. How could a flight that was supposed to be just over 3 hours have taken 5.5 years? Afterward, the police conducted a 36-hour inspection of all items on the plane, and after confirming there was nothing unusual, they notified the families to come for a reunion. A lot had happened in 5 years. Ben found that his wife Grace had aged a lot. His daughter Olive had grown into a graceful young woman. The twin siblings also had a significant gap now. At this moment, the sister Michaela found that their mother wasn't there. From their father, she learned that their mother had passed away from illness 2 years ago. The next day, Michaela went back to report to the police station, only to find that her position was no longer there. She saw her boyfriend Jared, whom she hadn't seen in 5 years, had matured a lot, and they started talking. Unintentionally, Michaela noticed the ring on Jared's hand and learned that he had married her best friend, which left Michaela heartbroken and she turned to leave. The distraught Michaela sat on the bus home, and suddenly a woman's voice popped into her mind.
Slower. Excuse me, can you slow down? Slower. Slow down now!
How'd you see him coming? Lady, how the hell?
Michaela was also very puzzled by this. When she got home, Michaela told her brother about the mysterious voice she had heard. Ben told Michaela not to tell anyone else, warning her that if she was found out, she might be taken away for research. The next day, while Michaela was jogging in the morning, she passed by a warehouse. That mysterious voice appeared again. Let them go! Let them go! Michaela saw only 2 dogs and didn't pay much attention as she turned to leave. At night, the sleeping Michaela was suddenly awakened by that mysterious voice. It was still saying, "Let them go." So Michaela went to the warehouse she had passed by during the day. Just as she was figuring out how to release the dogs, Ben drove up. It turned out that Ben had also heard the same mysterious voice calling. They then opened the iron gate and let the 2 dogs out, but they didn't know that everything had been recorded by someone, and the police had been notified. Fortunately, the case was assigned to Michaela's ex-boyfriend Jared. Jared found Michaela and scolded her, thinking that Michaela was deliberately causing trouble to get back at him. He was currently handling a missing girl case. Jared then took Michaela to return the dogs, hoping the owner wouldn't press charges. But as they approached the warehouse, the voice "let them go" reappeared in Michaela's mind. Michaela went to the backyard of the warehouse and followed the voice to a locked room. She directly picked up an iron rod and started smashing the lock. Ignoring Jared's attempts to stop her, Michaela smashed the lock nearly 1,000 times before it finally broke open. When Michaela opened the door, she found 2 girls locked inside. The man, seeing this, picked up an iron rod and attacked Jared, but luckily Jared managed to subdue him in time. The girls were rescued. Jared gave the credit to Michaela, which led to her being reinstated to her position. Jared asked her how she knew, but Michaela said she couldn't explain it herself. That very night, all the passengers of Flight 828 coincidentally gathered at the airport. As if they were summoned by some unseen force, the plane parked. There was Flight 828. Before anyone could react, the plane suddenly exploded. Scientists didn't even have time to study Flight 828 before it turned into a pile of wreckage. This made the already mysterious plane even more baffling. Subsequently, the authorities interrogated every passenger of Flight 828 present at the scene, but everyone said the same thing. Suddenly felt like going to see the plane, and it exploded just as we arrived. How could everyone on the plane have the same thought at the same time? Ultimately, there was no way to prove these people had anything to do with the explosion, so they were released. However, they were required not to disclose anything about Flight 828 to the media or their families. One day, Ben was walking down the street when suddenly, a musical melody kept ringing in his ears. He followed the sound through the crowd and finally found a man playing the violin. It turned out that Rad was also a passenger on Flight 828. Ever since Rad returned home, the melody kept playing in his ears. He believed it was a distress signal from his son. 5 years ago, he left his son Adio in the care of a neighbor because he had to go on a gig. Who knew that a short 3-hour flight would turn into 5 years when they landed? 13-year-old Adio had turned into an 18-year-old young man before they could meet. Adio was wrongly accused of robbery and put in prison. Rad hoped Ben could help Adio. Through his sister Michaela's connections, Ben arranged for the father and son to meet in prison. Despite Adio being beaten and covered in injuries, he firmly said he was framed and then told his father the whole story. Ben and Rad went to the jewelry store. When Mr. Valero learned of their identities, he left angrily, but his son, Blake, was very polite and calmly explained the situation to Ben and Rad. When Ben returned home, his son Cal kept clamoring for his old toys. Olive took Ben to the warehouse to find the toys. Suddenly, that familiar melody rang in Ben's ears again. Ben began to search, following the sound of the music. In a warehouse, Ben saw a man on the phone discussing a jewelry deal. In front of the man were the stolen jewels from the jewelry store, and the man was none other than Blake, the jewelry store owner's son. Before Ben could question him, Blake offered to give Ben half of the loot. Ben punched Blake, knocking him out. Blake was taken away by the police. Rad's son was exonerated, and the father and son were reunited. That night, Kelly, a female passenger from Flight 828, was watching her special interview. She revealed everything about Flight 828, even saying the government was behind it all. Just as Kelly was feeling pleased with herself, Michaela and Ben arrived at the scene in their capacity as detectives. They initially concluded that it was a robbery homicide. Nothing was missing from the house except for the high-end necklace around Kelly's neck. Based on clues provided by witnesses, they arrested a suspect around the crime scene, who had Kelly's blood on him. Michaela spoke with Kelly's husband, Patrick, to learn more. Patrick said that since Kelly returned, it was like she had become a different person, and she often talked about being called by something. Michaela felt that things were not that simple and that Kelly must have known something, leading to her being silenced. The next day, Michaela investigated the Kelly couple's assets and discovered they owned an underground shopping mall. To uncover the truth, Michaela and Ben went to the shopping mall. Strangely, just as Michaela was about to ask for some clues, a woman saw her and bolted. After over 7 hours of chasing, they finally cornered Tammy in the basement. It turned out that the mall was rented out to illegal immigrants, with Patrick making a profit by charging high rents. If they didn't pay, he would report them to immigration. Kelly came by yesterday. Tammy thought Kelly was here to collect the rent and pushed her to the ground. However, Kelly said she wasn't there to collect rent but to stop her husband's actions. At that moment, Michaela realized that Kelly had acted because she heard the calling, but this had affected Patrick's interests, making him a likely suspect in Kelly's murder. Subsequently, Michaela immediately arrested Patrick. The investigation revealed that Patrick had committed many crimes. However, when Kelly was killed, Patrick was indeed not at home. 16 witnesses testified that he was at a restaurant. The case hit a dead end again. That night, as Michaela drove home, she suddenly saw a car heading straight for an old woman. In a critical moment, Michaela floored the gas and intercepted the car just in time. When Michaela checked the car, she found that the driver was Christine, Kelly's housemaid, and the necklace on the passenger seat was the one Kelly had lost. Michaela immediately drew her gun and subdued Christine. It turned out that during the 5 years Kelly was missing, Christine had been taking care of the household and had long considered herself the mistress of the house. But when Kelly returned, she started bossing Christine around and often flaunted her necklace. In a fit of rage, Christine killed Kelly. They initially thought the murder was connected to Flight 828, but it turned out to be a crime of passion. Just as Michaela thought the case was about to be resolved, both she and her brother received a call from Dr. Sanvi. Sanvi was also a passenger on Flight 828 and is Ben's son Cal's primary physician. She discovered a mysterious marker in both Cal's and her own blood. Through tests, she learned that this might be due to ischemia leading to a stroke. Such a marker appears only in people who have been near death and then revived. To prove this theory, they could only verify it using the brain tissue of a passenger from Flight 828. The recently deceased Kelly was the best candidate, but when Sandy searched all the morgue databases, she couldn't find Kelly's body. Kelly's body had mysteriously been taken away by the authorities. Sandy was playing on her tablet with her head down when she looked up and saw a strange figure walking past her, leaving a trail of wet footprints on the ground. Sandy followed the footprints and looked back. A bizarre figure suddenly appeared in front of her, nearly causing her to scream in fright. When Sandy looked back again, there was nothing there. Feeling that she might be experiencing mental issues, she went to the psychiatry department for a brain CT scan. The initial diagnosis was schizophrenia. A man named Thomas in the hospital had similar symptoms and needed further observation for confirmation. Sandy decided to find the patient Thomas to get some information. The wet footprints appeared on the floor again, and Sandy followed them to a ward. Coincidentally, Thomas ran out from inside and grabbed Sandy's arm, shouting flight attendant Bethany repeatedly. Fortunately, the medical staff gave Thomas a sedative, but Thomas's words seemed to make Sandy think of something. Sandy then found Ben and told him about what happened today. Now, they needed to find that flight attendant to get answers. Luckily, Ben had kept all the contact information for the passengers of Flight 828, and he sent Bethany's address to Sandy. However, Thomas was now also being watched by Homeland Security. Upon investigation, they found that Thomas was not on the passenger list for Flight 828, but his fingerprints were discovered on the plane. The only explanation was that Thomas was a stowaway on Flight 828. Meanwhile, Sandy found the flight attendant Bethany. Bethany immediately recognized Sandy as a passenger from the flight, and she revealed the truth. It turned out that Thomas was a friend of Bethany's cousin. To help her cousin, Bethany had secretly brought Thomas on the plane and hidden him in the cabin. When the plane landed, Thomas had sneaked off. After learning the truth, Sandy took Bethany to the hospital, but when they arrived at the ward, Thomas was already gone. Sandy saw what footprints on the floor, and they followed the prints. At this moment, Homeland Security also arrived. Finding that Thomas was missing, they ordered a search of the surrounding area. Michaela and Jared had a heated argument while on a mission. Suddenly a woman with wings appears in front of the car, which scares Michaela so much that she can't speak. Michaela doesn't know what the summoning means and calls her brother to explain the situation. Ben informed Michaela that Sandy had also received the same calling. Sandy and Bethany ran out of the hospital and coincidentally met Michaela, who was driving up. In the car, they talked about the mysterious gray woman they had seen. One had water on her feet. One had wings. Bethany was immediately inspired, exclaiming that it was the statue of the water angel. They quickly rushed over and indeed found the escaped Thomas there. It turned out that this was the place where Thomas and his boyfriend first met. For Thomas's safety, Michaela took him to the boiler room in the underground mall to hide for the time being. When Ben learned that Thomas was an illegal immigrant, he urged Michaela not to get involved. Ben believed that these mysterious callings were dangerous and would eventually bring trouble to them. Just as he turned to leave, he heard a mysterious calling. Everything is connected. Ben struggled to resist the calling, convinced that these mysterious callings would eventually ruin their lives. Back at home, Ben asked his son Cal if he had heard any calling. Ben only breathed a sigh of relief after learning that his son had not been called. To avoid being affected by the calling, Ben decided to use a coin flip to determine their next move. According to the coin's direction, Ben took Cal to the amusement park. After having a good time, they took the underground home, but Cal got off the train halfway. The more Ben chased, the faster Cal ran. After passing through a metal door, Cal kept shouting. Ben was momentarily stunned. Wasn't this the calling he had heard before? Cal then ran into an abandoned subway station, opened a vent, and crawled right in. Following the vent, Cal surprisingly reached the basement where Thomas was hiding. The first time Cal saw Thomas, he accurately called out his name. Ben, who had caught up, was stunned and asked his son how he knew Thomas's name. Cal said he didn't know. It just came out. Ben then asked how he knew this place. Cal still said he didn't know. He just ran and came here. Ben felt that there must be more to this. His son couldn't have just stumbled upon this place by chance. It had to be connected to Flight 828 somehow. Just then, Cal suddenly pulled Ben, urging him to leave quickly. Ben asked why, and Cal looked at the door and said someone was coming. The next second, there was a knock on the door. They prepared to run. Cal looked at the door again and said it was a friend. Ben cautiously opened the door, and it turned out to be Bethany's wife, Georgia. Georgia told Thomas that Bethany had been taken away by the NSA for questioning on her way over, and now she was here to take Thomas away. Back home, Ben connected all the passengers of Flight 828 together. Through Cal, Ben realized that all the passengers couldn't escape the mysterious callings. He needed to find out what happened to the passengers on Flight 828, but Ben didn't know that Cal had seen the truth. At that time, everyone on the plane had their eyes closed, resting. Suddenly, a bright light caught Cal's attention. He opened the shade and saw a miraculous scene. That night, Cal suddenly had a splitting headache and kept shouting, "Don't go to the red door." They measured his temperature and found that Cal had a fever of 58.6 degrees. Ben thought his son was delirious from the fever and took him to the hospital, but the doctors couldn't find any reason for Cal's high fever. Moreover, Cal's fever persisted, and he occasionally muttered a few words. Sandy suddenly remembered hearing those words before. A passenger on Flight 828 had asked for help, saying those exact words. If they could find him, they might understand the cause. Ben took out the information he had previously collected and showed Sandy a photo for identification. Sandy immediately recognized the man. His name was Marco, a Bulgarian, but since he got off the plane, there had been no information about him. Sandy then remembered Anna, who sat behind her on the plane and helped Marco fill out his customs declaration. Soon after, Michaela found Anna to inquire about the situation. Anna said that Marco was taken to a shelter after getting off the plane. Michaela checked and found 4 vehicles, but none of them had Marco in them. Anna corrected her, saying it wasn't 4 vehicles, but 5. She saw with her own eyes that Marco got into the 5th vehicle. This raised questions. Where did the 5th vehicle go? Ben pulled up the footage from that time and found that 11 people were indeed missing. To get to the bottom of it, Michaela tracked the 5th bus through surveillance and found it had taken a turn mid-route. Using Michaela's findings, Ben mapped out possible hiding places and sent the photos to Michaela for her to investigate. These people were experimenting on Marco, but Cal on the other side suffered the same pain. Following Ben's map, Michaela discovered a suspicious farm. The farm was not only under drone surveillance but also heavily guarded. As soon as Michaela and Jared got out of the car, they were spotted by a guard. Fortunately, Michaela acted quickly and punctured the car tire. The guard, holding a machine gun, approached and saw that their car was broken down, so he didn't give them any trouble. He watched as they changed the tire and drove away. Not far down the road, Michaela spotted a red door next to the farm. She took some photos and sent them to Ben. This strengthened Ben's belief that his son's fever was related to Marco, and that saving him would cure Cal. To save his son, Ben went to the NSA to ask why they took the passengers from the 5th bus and locked them up on the farm. Robert at the NSA was baffled. They also didn't know about the 5th bus, let alone that it had taken 11 passengers away. Using Ben's information, the NSA gathered some data and headed to the farm immediately. The people at the farm, upon learning they were exposed, stopped the experiments and prepared to move. As soon as they stopped, Cal's fever subsided, and his consciousness returned to normal. When the NSA arrived at the farm, they found it empty. Everything had been moved, and Robert only found a discarded test patch on the ground. Ben realized that to save his son, he must first save Marco, but Marco had been taken by a mysterious company, making him very difficult to find. Ben believed that although they had relocated, they would continue their research. If he could track their funding, he could find them. Ben then went to an accounting firm and, with his persuasive skills, successfully got hired. He received an employee badge and smoothly joined the company, but his low position denied him access to many documents. So, he used an oven to destroy his work badge. The next day, unable to open the door, Ben successfully tricked the supervisor into giving him their badge. Using the supervisor's badge, Ben accessed confidential files. However, a file named SP was restricted even for the supervisor. Fortunately, Ben discovered that the project leader was someone named Fiona. Coincidentally, Fiona was also a passenger on Flight 828. Ben believed Fiona must be connected to the mysterious company, because Fiona's research is exactly the experiment of shared feelings between people. To uncover the truth, Ben found Fiona and directly asked her about the 11 passengers, but Fiona knew nothing about it. Ben said that the secret research data was named after her. Fiona then mentioned that a non-profit organization had approached her, offering to fund her consciousness and body research and pay her a high fee to give lectures and promote it. However, they never mentioned detaining 11 passengers. It turned out Fiona was being used as well. To uncover the truth, they needed the data in the SP file. Soon, Ben started mingling with senior personnel, eating, drinking, and having fun with them daily. It wasn't long before he became good friends with them. One day, Ben brought 2 cups of coffee to David for advice. then intentionally spilled the coffee on him. David hurried to change clothes, and Ben seized the opportunity to open the database and copy all the data. Then he sent a message to Sanvi, but Ben doesn't know that his mobile phone has been monitored by Robert from the security bureau. Ben was about to leave when he noticed the company was conducting a search. He quickly hid the data in his thermos. Just as they were about to search him, Ben received a text message telling him to move to the left. Ben was puzzled and went over there, but he didn't expect it to be Robert from the NSA. Without wasting any words, Robert demanded that Ben hand over the data, threatening to arrest him if he refused. With no other choice, Ben reluctantly complied. Back home, Ben was visibly disappointed. Cal noticed Ben's mood and told him that Robert wasn't a bad guy but was actually on their side. Robert, having obtained the data, didn't inform anyone. He intended to uncover the mysterious organization's conspiracy thoroughly. Robert had reviewed the contents of the USB drive. It contained medical data but did not mention the laboratory's location, one working for the country and the other for his family. They reached a mutual understanding. Robert then returned the data to Ben and gave him an encrypted phone. When Ben opened the USB drive, he couldn't make sense of the data. Suddenly, he remembered Fiona and called her to explain the data. Fiona was stunned upon hearing it. It turned out they were trying to artificially replicate the callings. She had only conducted such experiments on mice, attempting to link the brainwaves of multiple mice. The experiment failed, and all the mice died. Now, they were using live humans for these experiments, which was extremely dangerous. Fiona told Ben to do whatever it takes to stop them, to find the secret organization's experimental base. Ben decided to approach his boss, Ronnie. Ben immediately started flattering Ronnie, saying that he noticed how hard Ronnie worked every day and volunteered to help ease his workload. Ronnie, delighted by the offer, didn't hesitate to send Ben the company's annual property data. In the data, Ben discovered that the mysterious company had recently purchased hundreds of properties, making finding the lab like looking for a needle in a haystack. So, Ben came up with another plan. He obtained a listening device from Robert and had Fiona meet with Lawrence from the company. While Lawrence was distracted, Fiona secretly placed the bug under the table. Ben then intentionally searched the company intranet for information about the 11 missing passengers from Flight 828. Soon the company assistant came to tell Lawrence that there is something wrong, so Lawrence immediately ended the conversation with Fiona. As soon as Fiona left, Lawrence made a phone call. Through the listening device, Robert discovered that a major was behind the operations and that the lab was located in Brooklyn. However, there were 25 branch offices there, making it difficult to pinpoint the exact location of the lab. That night, after work, Ben sneaked into the company, hoping to find the lab's precise location. In the numerous files, he found the address of the lab in Brooklyn and took a photo of it with his phone. It was a chemical warehouse in the Gulch district. Marco was already strapped to a test bed, and they were about to start a new experiment. Ben had just found the lab when a woman wandered up to him. Her name was Autumn, another passenger from Flight 828 who had escaped from the experimental base. Autumn found Ben by following the summons in her mind. Ben then gathered everyone in the basement to discuss how to rescue the others. Ben wanted to take immediate action, but Robert urged caution, warning that the people there were heavily armed. Ben insisted they couldn't wait, as starting the experiment would endanger all Flight 828 passengers. To convince Robert, Ben revealed the secret that Flight 828 passengers could hear callings and sense each other. Robert was utterly shocked upon hearing this. On the other side, the mysterious organization restarted the experiment. They first set Marco's voltage to 40. The intense pain was transmitted to only 2 people, but the major watching through the camera was not satisfied. Her ordered the staff to double the current. As the current increased, all the passengers present showed expressions of agony. Even the other Flight 828 passengers outside the lab felt the intense pain. Cal even had a nosebleed, but he endured the pain to draw a picture. At this moment, Robert realized the gravity of the situation and immediately led a team to surround the lab. But when they stormed in, they found it empty again. Was someone tipping them off? Or was there a problem with the intel? While everyone argued, Cal suddenly appeared. He found the place by feel and took out his own drawings. He told Ben that the lab was between 2 trees. Sure enough, they found a hidden door there. Cal insisted that Ben come with them, saying only he could lead them out. As soon as they entered the basement, a fierce battle ensued. The opposition immediately ordered the destruction of all experimental materials. After a fierce fight, Robert and his team broke into the lab. Ben and his team focused on rescuing the passengers while Robert pursued the fleeing individuals. As Ben led the rescued passengers back, they couldn't find their way out. Then, two lights appeared before Ben.
Follow the lights. To the right.
What lights?
You don't see path lights?
No. Oh my God, Carl said you'd be the only one to see.
It turned out Cal had insisted Ben go in because he was the only one who could lead everyone out. Following the lights, Ben guided the passengers out of the lab. Meanwhile, the fleeing individuals were successfully captured by Robert, but on their way back, they got lost. Michaela noticed that Jared and Robert hadn't returned, so she went back to assist. Just as they reached the door, an explosion occurred, knocking them unconscious with the strong blast. Ben woke up and quickly roused the unconscious Michaela. Michaela told Ben to take Cal and leave first while she went back to search. When she arrived, it was already too late. Jared was severely injured. Robert wasn't as lucky. He had sacrificed himself. Autumn felt extremely guilty, thinking it was her fault. Everyone comforted Autumn, but as soon as they left, Autumn pulled out a hidden phone from her sock and asked for instructions on what to do next. The 11 missing passengers from Flight 828 were rescued. However, they appeared catatonic and occasionally experienced collective convulsions. Doctors immediately examined them. Sandy suspected it was a side effect of the experiments, indicating they were still interconnected. Michaela came to investigate and saw a familiar face. She reached out to grab the man's sleeve, and suddenly a vision of a snowstorm filled her mind, accompanied by a voice repeatedly shouting, "Find him!" Michaela was frightened and stepped back repeatedly. She found it strange that this calling was different from the previous ones. At that moment, the man awoke but sadly had lost all his memories, not even remembering his own last name. Sandy thinks that Michaela has gained new powers and asks her to try to awaken the others. This time, however, there was no response. On the other hand, Ben arrives at Robert's funeral, but is mercilessly chased away by Tim. Tim blamed Ben for Robert's death. Ben had no choice but to leave. A reporter then approached Ben, proposing an information exchange to get a hot story. He told Ben that an hour before they raided the lab, a major had parachuted in. The explosion was definitely premeditated. Ben realized that the major was the true mastermind. Ben then gathered those who could hear the callings, hoping to glean some information. Captain Bill insisted on speaking with Ben alone. Bill suspected that everything was Fiona's conspiracy. He mentioned that Fiona had just begun researching shared consciousness when she boarded Flight 828, and then the plane vanished for 5 years. All of this could be Fiona's experiment. Bill also said that they couldn't let things fall into the wrong hands. After saying this, he turned and left. Ben turned around and saw Autumn eavesdropping on their conversation. Autumn openly admitted she was eavesdropping and told Ben that she had heard about a major in the lab, who was a woman. She also mentioned hearing them talk about searching for something called the Holy Grail. Ben thought about Michaela's calling to find him. Could the major be the man they're looking for? But who exactly was the major? Ben then went to find Tim and told him everything. Robert had been killed by a major, and he needed Tim's help to find out who this major was. Although Tim was skeptical, he decided to help Ben this time. That evening, Ben received a call from Tim. The major's private plane, a Black Hawk, had a flight plan with a destination of New York. Just after hanging up the phone, Tim was abducted. Meanwhile, Ben and others were discussing how to accommodate the rescued passengers. Suddenly, Michaela felt the calling more clearly. She realized it wasn't her own calling but someone else's that she was hearing. At the same time, Sanvi discovered the major's Holy Grail. The Holy Grail wasn't an object but a person with foresight and heightened sensitivity. Ben immediately thought of his son Cal. At that moment, Cal saw someone in the snowstorm holding a photo of Michaela and repeatedly shouting to find her. Everyone blamed Captain Bill. Some said Bill had flown the plane to an island and used low temperatures to freeze the passengers. Others claimed Bill was an alien invading Earth. Under the pressure of public opinion, even Bill's family didn't dare to contact him. Bill couldn't even find basic work. To uncover the truth and clear his name, Bill approached Ben and showed him the flight data for Flight 828. Bill took Ben to the flight simulator. Here, they could completely replicate the weather conditions the plane encountered that day. However, the data provided by the government couldn't recreate the actual scenario, leading him to believe that the government was covering up the truth. To uncover the truth, Ben began investigating the weather conditions from 5 years ago. He discovered that a meteorologist had studied the connection between the plane's disappearance and the weather, but just as he was making progress, The expert retired and returned to his hometown, and the meteorological area that this expert is studying is the same area where the plane disappeared. Ben and Bill found the meteorologist, Roger, but Roger refused to talk about what happened. After persistent persuasion from Ben, Roger finally agreed to reveal the truth. Roger said that black lightning had been detected on his instruments that day, and that it was this black lightning that caused the plane to disappear, but the authorities denied his findings and ordered Roger to destroy all his research and retire. Fortunately, Roger kept a backup of the core data and handed it over to Ben. Using this data, Bill simulated the flight. Sure enough, they recreated the weather conditions, and black lightning appeared. Bill followed the same procedures as that day, but just as they approached the glowing mass, the simulator suddenly shut down. They repeated the experiment 8 times, all ending in failure. Bill believed it was related to Fiona's telepathy research and might be the key to the plane's time travel. Bill wanted to involve Fiona in the experiment, but Ben stopped him. Meanwhile, Autumn asked Michaela for help and shared her past experiences with her. At that moment, Michaela received a call from Ben, who told her they had found the weather data from that day. Autumn overheard everything. The next day, Michaela saw news of Roger's death and immediately informed Ben. They speculated that Bill might be in danger. Michaela and Ben rushed to Bill's house and found the walls covered with information about Flight 828. Through the weather forecast on his computer, they discovered that Bill planned to fly into the storm, so they hurried to the airport. When Bill arrived at Fiona's house, he took advantage of a moment when Fiona wasn't paying attention to drug her unconscious, then took her onto a plane. By the time Ben arrived, Bill had already taken off. To prove his innocence and uncover the truth, Bill risked his life flying into the storm.
Captain, you think you were the only one who...
The plane once again vanished from the sky. That evening, Ben and Michaela discussed who might have leaked the information about Roger giving them the data. Michaela suddenly remembered that when Ben called her, Autumn was right there, overhearing everything. If it was Autumn, she would know all of Cal's secrets. Realizing this, Ben hurried home. By then, Cal had mysteriously disappeared, so Ben quickly searched through his sketchbook. He knew his son always drew his premonitions in the book. As soon as Ben opened the first page, they were stunned. It depicted their current situation. It seemed Cal had foreseen everything. The second drawing showed a boy locked in a room with a mysterious shadow standing at the door. They guessed it might be the Major. Turning to the next page, they saw a wide road. Ben noticed a page was missing. Michaela said Autumn had probably taken it. The rest were landscape drawings. One depicted a church at the foot of a mountain. Ben and his wife immediately drove there. They carried Cal's photo and asked around. Meanwhile, Michaela found Autumn and detained her, demanding to know where she had taken Cal and to hand over the missing page. But Autumn refused to admit to anything. Michaela asked Autumn if the Major had something on her, but Autumn still refused to say anything. Through her investigation, Michaela learned that Autumn had a daughter who was adopted when Flight 828 disappeared. As a result, Autumn was caught in the Major's grip, and she had to work for the Major in order to get her daughter back. Michaela quickly used her connections to find Autumn's daughter and gave her the information. Autumn also handed over the painting. Seeing the cottage in the picture, Michaela was certain Cal was there. She immediately sent the image to Ben. Ben follows the markings on the picture and they quickly find the cabin. Grace looked through the window and saw Cal curled up on the floor. They rushed into the cabin and hugged Cal tightly. However, Cal remained very calm, as if he had foreseen everything. Grace asked Cal why he came here. Cal said he was supposed to be here and that he was waiting for someone who was about to arrive. Just as Cal finished speaking, someone ran up and crashed into the door, breaking it open within moments. Ben was about to grab something to attack the man, but Cal shouted, "It's him! Don't hurt him!" The man looked at them and then collapsed to the floor. Ben saw that he was freezing and quickly used the items Cal had prepared to warm him up. Soon Michaela arrived too, and as she was asking what was going on, she suddenly noticed the clothes on the floor. As Michaela reached up to touch the clothes, she experienced the calling from before. It turned out that this man was the source of Michaela's calling. At that moment, the man woke up and, upon seeing Michaela, called out her name. Zeke said he had come here to hike 2 weeks ago when he encountered a snowstorm and accidentally fell into a cave. To keep warm, he burned everything he had. He found a photo of Michaela in a magazine, and it was this photo that kept him going. He then walked step by step out of the snow to this place. After speaking, Zeke took out the photo and asked Michaela, "Weren't you dead?" Michaela said, "The news is full of stories about us surviving. Don't you watch the news?" Ben asks how long he's been here. Zeke said 2 weeks ago. Ben took the magazine and saw it was dated 2017. Ben looks at Zeke and asks him what year it is. Zeke quickly replied, 2017, but it was already 2018. Had Zeke traveled through time by 1 year? Ben and Michaela wanted to take Zeke to get his injuries checked out, but Zeke adamantly refused to go. Ben believed Zeke must be connected to Flight 828 and could even be a spy sent by the Major. Michaela told Ben to take his family home while she stayed to watch Zeke. After returning home, Ben handed the bandages used on Zeke to Sanvi for testing. Sure enough, Sanvi found the same markers in Zeke's blood that were present in theirs. This indicated that Zeke had indeed traveled through time, becoming someone who could receive callings just like the passengers of Flight 828. Michaela, who stayed behind, asked Zeke about the cave and suggested they go and take a look. However, Zeke seemed reluctant. Michaela kept persuading him, and when she inadvertently touched Zeke, a powerful force transported them under a starry sky.
Go back.
Zeke didn't understand what it meant, but Michaela was used to it and thought the calling to go back must refer to the cave. So, Zeke took Michaela to the cave to investigate. They walked into the cave and searched but found nothing unusual. When Michaela accidentally touched Zeke again, the same calling appeared.
Go back.
The calling to go back wasn't about the cave. So, where the hell is it? Michaela asked Zeke what stars meant to him. Zeke hesitated and then took out a star-shaped necklace he wore around his neck. It turned out Zeke had a sister, and this necklace was her favorite 9th birthday gift. Once, while hiking with his sister, Zeke took a phone call, causing his sister to fall to her death. So Zeke felt very guilty. He didn't dare to go home or face his family, which is why he didn't want to leave this place. Accompanied by Michaela, Zeke went to his sister's grave to confess, and he was able to free himself of his guilt. To thank Michaela, Zeke gave her a hug, but strangely, the calling persisted. Unlike the previous times, there was lightning in the sky. In the past, it was Zeke's voice, but this time it was Michaela's. Michaela believed this was a sign for her to help Zeke leave and return to a normal life. As they walked along the mountain path back, Zeke reached out to help Michaela. They discovered a drawing on the cliff wall depicting the same hand-holding scene. Before they could react, the starry sky suddenly erupted with lightning and thunder. James opened his mouth and water gushed out like a spring, flowing endlessly. Before long, he collapsed to the ground. A few days ago, James, desperate for money, had robbed an armored car. While fleeing, he drove the vehicle into a river. After some time, the armored car was finally retrieved from the water. Michaela went to observe the situation. She opened the car door, and a large amount of water poured out. At that moment, James suddenly woke up and lunged at Michaela. Having been submerged for over 80 hours, James was still alive, leaving Michaela utterly stunned. Could James have traveled through time too? An ambulance rushed James to the hospital, and tests revealed that his body was normal with no signs of drowning. Just then, James became agitated and kept shouting for everyone to leave, saying there was about to be an explosion. A doctor quickly administered a sedative to calm him down. Based on past experiences, Michaela felt that James might have received a calling. When James woke up, Michaela asked him about the explosion and shared some of her own callings with him. James found this ability to be amazing.